Beth, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I am here to talk to you about the flight test in the new golden age of aviation. I'd like to start off with some thank yous. Beth, Moran, David, and the rest of the team that put on this symposium. As someone who puts on symposiums myself, I know there's a lot of background work that goes into this. So great work in setting up all of these logistics. And thank you so much for having me. As Beth mentioned, I am the manager of test and evaluation here at AeroTEC. I am also the vice president of the Society of Flight Test Engineers. I have had the privilege of a 17-year career in the aerospace field, and not a single second of it has been boring. I consider myself very lucky and privileged to be able to say that. This is a really fun picture. This is a very young Jen Uchida standing in front of a MV-22 Osprey in Patuxent River, Maryland. We were going out that day to test the flight director system on that aircraft, a project that was very near and dear to my heart while I was there. This is my resume. Beth basically read that off to you. It's kind of boring. There are a couple exciting things on there. Test pilot school, the NASA astronaut selection, being one of the finalists in 2013 was truly a amazing and honoring experience, not to mention humbling at the same time. I've had some amazing experience, worked with some amazing people, and I feel extremely fortunate to say that I think I found my place here at AeroTEC and within the Society of Flight Test Engineers. Here at AeroTEC, we've got it's an amazing company. The culture, the people, our mission, my team that I get to work with on test programs. Mostly I feel heard and very supported here. And within the Society of Flight Test Engineers, I feel like I can make a difference and make an impact within the industry of flight test. This picture here, this is from test pilot school back in 2011. I went through Navy test pilot school, and every year, every class, there's a field trip and there's an exchange that happens with the Air Force test pilot school. So this was taken at Edwards Air Force Base on an F-16 flight. It was a really awesome flight. We pulled 9.1 Gs. We did some out of control maneuvers. It was just, it was the most amazing flight during that year. But what I'd like to draw your attention to is this patch on my shoulder. So this is the Go for Broke patch that the 442nd Regimental Combat Unit wore during World War II. That was the all Japanese American unit for the Army. Which leads me to my next slide here. Those are my grandparents. They were part of the internment camps during World War II, where they took all of the people of Japanese descent and put them into camps during the war. My grandparents met in the camps, they were married in the camps, and it plays a big role in who I am today and why I'm so driven to make an impact in the aerospace industry. My grandpa wanted to be an engineer, and despite his good grades and natural abilities, he was declined from every single university that he applied to, purely based on the fact that he was of Japanese descent. And when he and my grandma and their in that generation were released from the camps, they worked tirelessly to make sure that their children and my generation, nothing was impossible for us. And so here I am today speaking with all of you. It's such an honor as an aerospace engineer, as a leader in the flight test industry. And it just means so much to me to be able to talk to you about what's coming up technically in the aerospace industry, specifically aircraft and flight test. I'm very passionate about community outreach, diversity and inclusion, representation. They're all very important to me. So all that to say, again, thank you for having me today. I just wanted you to all have just a little bit of background about me as we dive into flight test in the new golden age of aviation. Before we really talk about the meat of this, let's talk about flight test. What is flight test? There are books and movies out there where it's all really exciting, and there's people in flight suits going Mach 2 with their hair on fire, right? If you've ever read or seen the movie The Right Stuff, it looks like a really exciting and dynamic world, and it is, but there's a lot of work that goes into preparing for the actual event of the test execution. This is a very simplified kind of graphic of the whole test planning process. So everything starts with requirements, right? Why do we test? Well, we test to prove something, to verify something. So we're working with engineering, design, and really defining what it is that we're testing to. So there's a couple ways you can break this down, right? Did they build what they said they were going to build? That's one way. And then there's the other side of the coin as well. Did they build the right thing for the job that they were building it for, or the mission? And so, you know, those are subtle nuances, but the big takeaway here in this box is that requirements are so important in setting up a test program, because that is the keystone. That's where everything starts. Once we get those established, the test planning process begins. It's kind of one big party. Everyone's involved. There's a bigger schedule that you're working within your own test program schedule. There's a lot of different views that you have to take when you're planning a test program. Your test pilots are involved, safety gets involved. Instrumentation plays a huge role in your test planning, depending on how much data it needs to be gathered. And of course, all the other aspects of a test program or just a program in general get involved: finance, contracts, etc. Once the test planning is all done, that's when the exciting part happens, right? That's when we go and get on the airplane, turn up the telemetry room, and go out there and gather our data. And really all of that prep work is important to make sure that we are able to gather not just data, but decision quality data, because there is someone at the end of this program, there is someone in a big fancy office somewhere that has to make a decision based off of the data that you gather, that you analyze and crunch and put in a report. So this report, this is the flight tester's product. This is what we produce. It involves a lot of high ability for technical writing, to be able to present data unbiased, clear and concise. And again, going back to that catchphrase right there, decision quality data. That is what I, as a flight test engineer, am always striving towards. So here are some key concepts that I have learned about flight test in my experience. This is how I try to lead my team. These are the fundamentals by which we try to operate. And something that I've really learned in my experience with flight tests, you know, both from military to civilian, working with the FAA, working through developmental demonstrator, new technology programs, the foundations of flight test are all the same, regardless of where you go or what it is you're testing. And so when you're, sorry, my notes here. And so the foundations are all the same. And so that's why I think that this simplified graphic kind of spells that out so well, because once you have that foundation laid, you can really start to build on that with the new and novel technology, with the classic type certifications through the FAAs. Stepping through these execution, you know, we're all running a business, right? We're all trying to make the industry move forward. We're not making money, we're not making progress if we're not executing. And so to be able to do that to the highest of standards is so important, and to be able to gather that decision quality data. Safety. Safety is not something that we pause to think about. It's woven into the foundation of how we do things. It is in our processes. It is in how we operate on a daily basis. Communication, interacting with many different engineering groups. Depending on the type of program, you may be working with an avionics group one day, or flight sciences. being able to have a general foundation knowledge of an aircraft and the systems and how that works is vital to being able to communicate with the different groups that you're going to be interacting with as a flight tester. Standards and procedures, having those in place is important when you want to accommodate any size test program. Now here at AeroTEC, it's really awesome because we have a very diverse technical background on our team. So government backgrounds, civilian backgrounds, we've had the opportunity to really cherry pick processes that work and build them into our own and making it AeroTEC. And we've purposely built our standards and procedures to be flexible so that we can accommodate, say, a huge type certification program or a small modification program, even all the way to one-off technology demonstrator flights. It's really been able to keep us flexible as the market has been changing and the technology has been advancing. Ownership and people really go hand in hand, and that brings me to one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite mentors. This is from Colonel Charlie Gray. He is a retired U.S. Marine Corps colonel. He is now the VP of flight test for Gulfstream Aerospace, which is not a surprise. He's a really, really great leader. And he always says, it's all about the people. So flight tests can't happen without the people. Taking care of your team and yourself is really important. Flight test can be a tough lifestyle. When a test program is up and running, you're really a slave to the flight schedule. There could be deployments and offsites, long days, weekends, and so making sure that the team is rested and feels well taken care of is important to be able to maintain a very high cadence of flight testing. Now, these are just a few examples of how a flight test organization or any organization really can take care of their people. And, you know, just being able to think about this in addition to the goal of collecting that decision quality data, I think is important because, like I said before, you know, the flight schedule can be very grueling, and deployments and offsites especially can be really hard, or when you're trying to meet a schedule or when you're trying to stay within a budget. All of these factors play into a flight test program. You know, in a perfect world, you know, we would have all the time in the world and unlimited budget to be able to execute exactly the way we want to and provide perfect data. But perfect data is not what we're after, right? We're after the decision quality data. And so again, investing and focusing on people so that we can get to that point is really important. Another thing that I want to highlight here is the safety aspect, right? Not something we pause to do, something that is woven into how we do business on an everyday basis. But how do you encourage thinking outside the box in a process-driven system? How do you encourage critical thinking when you have this solid foundation of how we do things, how we do business? And I think, and I mean, here are a few examples, but knowing the why in a process is a big piece of what creates a safety culture. The goal is to create a synthesis, a marriage between process and empowerment in order to have a culture where people feel empowered to make safe decisions as individuals and as a team. The test planning process, for example, is designed to have multiple outside reviewers, and that's in place for safety reasons. As an individual, you pour all your energy into creating this test plan. You pour all your energy into this document, into this. Sometimes they become beasts of documents, and you really need someone to question you on that, so that you have the opportunity to defend it and really come to the conclusion, yes, I have mitigated all the risks. I have thought of all the risks that I can, that we as a team have identified, and yes, this is indeed the safest way and the safest place to go with that. That is kind of the core and the fundamentals of the safety aspect of it, and how how does that get translated, right, from one group to another? Well, yes, you do have people that move from company to company. When I went through test pilot school as a civilian, there aren't a lot of spots for civilians at the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School. It's really kind of whatever's left over. Sometimes there's no spots in a class, sometimes there's 4. When I went through, there were 3 civilians, and the purpose of sending civilians through this military school is to be able to bring back that knowledge and provide training to the flight test engineers and the people, the civil servants who don't get to go through test pilot school. You become a leader and a mentor within the flight test community at NAVAIR, and that's really important as far as communication and spreading the knowledge. What we do at Test Pilot School as civilians is we learn how to relate what we're doing in flight tests, why we go out and gather that data, how that relates to the mission that those test pilots, those military test pilots, are out flying. And that is kind of a cultural thing within NAVAIR. But how does that spread even greater to the greater flight test community? Well, that's where the Society of Flight Test Engineers comes in. Our society exists to be a conduit of communication for flight testers around the world. Sharing lessons learned and technical advancement is at the core of what we do. Every year we host our annual symposium. It is an amazing event. We present there's a training portion, but mostly there's presentations of technical papers. And it's a great event where old friends come to meet, you meet new contacts, and everybody learns something, because all of these test programs that are going on, there are lessons that are learned every single time a test program completes or runs through. And sharing those lessons learned so someone else doesn't have to learn those same lessons is key to accelerating the advancement of the technology and accelerating flight test, and also to make it safer. So super duper quick history of SFTE here. SFTE was founded in the living room of a Boeing flight test engineer in Seattle. They figured it out that it was awesome to be able to have a forum where they can talk about the technical things, challenges that they were facing in flight test. There was another group in Long Island as well that became part of this group, and shortly after this relationship was formed, the Seattle flight test saw an issue with one of their jets, and they picked up the phone in Seattle, called Long Island. Turns out they saw something very similar on one of their jets, and through more conversations, a little bit of math, they figured out that the root cause for these similar problems was the exact same thing. This saved the Seattle flight test team probably weeks worth of work. So fast forward to a year later, the first chapter, which is in Antelope Valley, was formed. And then fast forward again, 50 years, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary here in Seattle. That was a really fun event. And then the global pandemic hit, right? It really turned flight test on its head. It turned the whole world on its head, really. But, from our standpoint, we really had to reevaluate how we're doing flight tests. What exactly does it mean to have a minimum crew, and how do we keep everybody safe when we have to go up there and collect that data? I love this photo. This is a Boeing photo. They were getting the 737 Maxes back out. That's Kevin Welsh on the bottom right there. He's one of my good friends and a director on the board. We had to figure it out. The flight test community had to figure it out. 2021 is when I became vice president. We've launched a lot of really cool things. The society is not what it used to be. We've come a long way since that first living room meeting in Seattle. And, our goal, we're constantly asking ourselves, how is today's flight test climate evolving, growing, and most importantly, continuing to improve? Membership in the society is at an all-time high right now. And I think it should grow. I want it to grow more. I want to expand outreach, more diversity and more inclusion. We have a social media presence now, because the more stories and the more experience we have within the society, the more lessons there are that we can all benefit from. You know, we are in a new golden age of aviation. And why do I say that? You hear all of these new buzzwords, right? Advanced air mobility, urban air mobility, VTOL is a big thing right now. Alternative fuels, batteries, hydrogen, hybrid solution. And in addition to all of that, automation is making a big play in the industry as well right now. There are over 200 new startups in this field alone. You know, the focus, I think, for a lot of these companies is right here: expansion of regional commercial air travel, reduce noise level around airports, and really that takes a big shift in infrastructure and requirements for the airports. But how are these companies staffing for these programs? How are the regulatory authorities going to keep up? These are the big questions that are kind of looming around the industry right now, the big technical challenges that we're all trying to think about right now. These are just a very few examples of what we're doing, of how we're trying to build this future around community. So the Vertical Flight Society, in partnership with AIAA and the Society of Flight Test Engineers, has created this eVTOL Flight Test Council. There are hundreds of people involved in this council right now, from large OEMs, government, small startups, regulatory authorities like the FAA. We all meet every other Tuesday to discuss how things are advancing, not just technically, but also within the regulations and the rules. How are we going to certify these aircraft? The Society of Flight Test Engineers, like I mentioned, we have an annual symposium every year, and each year we have more and more papers talking about this new advancement in technology. I had the opportunity at last year's symposium to write a paper titled "Things Flight Testers Should Know About Batteries for Electric Propulsion." And it was really the first one out of what I hope to be many papers that talk about the challenges that flight testers are seeing out there when flight testing these new technologies. University of Colorado, so I'm part of the external advisory board for CU for the aerospace department, and you know, our job is to provide feedback to the department on the readiness of the students as they come out of school. And so this has become a huge topic in our board meetings, you know, talking about how the students are prepared to be able to face this this new golden age of aviation. How much of this technology are they able to contribute to? And then, of course, so this patch right here, this blue and orange one, this is the AeroTEC test and evaluation patch. Here at AeroTEC, our goal is to accelerate the evolution of aerospace. That is our number one goal. We at AeroTEC we're an airplane company. If there's anything that a company wants to do with an aircraft, we can handle it. From clean sheet design aircraft to one-off modifications. We have a machine shop, we can do our own machining. And we have our flagship facility in Moses Lake out in Eastern Washington. This is where all the magic happens. This is where my department operates out of. Now we'll deploy to anywhere that our customers need us to, but out at Moses Lake, we have everything we need. It's a certified MRO station. We've got all the operators, mechanics, technicians out there. We have 2 wide body hangars and a narrow body hangar. As you can see in this photo here, we have a lot of space to do work with aircraft. Not to mention that airport is extremely accommodating. The runways are really wide and they're really long. The military has used it for a very long time. It used to be a divert airfield for the shuttle, which should tell you a little bit something about the accommodations that they have there. Some really cool projects that we've been able to execute in the recent past. So the MAGNIX eCARAVAN in 2020, we took out the We took out the engine from a Cessna Caravan and put in a MAGNIX electric motor. It was powered by lithium-ion batteries. We gutted the entire aircraft, put all these batteries inside of it, and we had 3 flights of the eCARAVAN. That really put AeroTEC on the map for us with respect to alternative fuel aviation. And we have been able to, we learned a lot of lessons during this program. We learned a lot of not just technical, right, with the batteries and the motor, but logistically, you know, the infrastructure at the airport, you know, being able to accommodate those batteries and that type of aircraft. It was really eye-opening, and it was really cool to be able to kind of document those lessons learned and implement them into our processes so that we can accommodate more programs. Right now, we have a de Havilland Dash 8 in our hangars right now. It is being modified to accommodate hydrogen fuel cells and another MAGNIX motor. This is a super exciting program. I wish I had a picture for you, but you'll hopefully see a lot more about this program later this year. Also on our docket is the EVIATION Alice. We are supporting the development of this program right now in preparation for their first flight. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the EVIATION Alice in the news recently, especially around here. They've been doing a lot of ground testing out at Arlington Airfield. So again, going back to those challenges and lessons learned that we've really documented in our recent experiences with alternative fuel aviation. So you know, airspace is a big thing. How is the FAA going to structure the airspace to accommodate not just the fuel, but the mission, right? So the mission of this new technology is to be able to increase the opportunity for transportation, and how is that airspace going to accommodate that? I mentioned facility infrastructure earlier. You know, you can't just plug these aircraft into a wall outlet, right? You need there are certain specifications that need to be met in order to be able to charge these aircraft. You know, maybe there's some sort of battery swapping program in the future so that you don't have to plug in the actual airplane. You can just take out a battery pack and switch it over for a new one and take off to the next airport. Again, same thing with hydrogen. You know, are we swapping out fuel cells or are we refueling the fuel cells? All of these things need to be taken into consideration as we move forward with this technology development as well. And I think the big hope is that affordability is also going to be accessible, right? We want all of this to be accessible to everybody. We want equity within the opportunity to have this technology. Additionally, with the increase in automation, right? Reliability is a huge thing. Is the general public trusting of automation and automatic remote piloted aircraft? Supply chain is also something that is a big topic. I know a lot of companies, and it's all over the news, how the supply chain has been disrupted. What can we pull back into the US? What can we pull back into our own hands? And that kind of transitions into, you know, the life extension of existing aircraft. We have existing aircraft on hand. So do we have the tools here at our disposal to be able to extend the life of these, modify them to accommodate these new electric motors and alternative fuels? I guess I should touch on some of these bullet points here. Going back to the Moses Lake Airport and how they were so accommodating. You know, when you're running a flight test program, it's important to not just have coordination within the engineering and the technical side of things, but the logistical side, right? We're operating out of a public airport, and they are so accommodating. We had to train their crash fire rescue team to tell them, hey, this is a battery powered aircraft. definitely don't cut into one of those lithium ion cells if you need to cut into the aircraft to extract the pilot. There's arc flash training as well, communicating with the tower of our intent and what we needed to do to make those flights happen. And I spoke to facility needs already. So with batteries and other fuels, I touched already a little bit about how do we handle those things, and it almost feels like we're trying to change the tire while we're barreling down the highway, right? We're learning a lot of lessons, and that goes back to the core fundamentals of flight test and the core communication within flight test and the greater community of advanced aircraft mobility. How do we accelerate technology advancements and get more out of these fuel systems and do that safely, right? Because we want everybody to accelerate this, and we want everybody to be able to contribute to this technology advancement. And I think that goes back to tie this all together, I think that goes back to the foundation and the fundamentals, right? If you have that foundation laid, you can easily build upon that to accommodate new and novel technology. So we at AeroTEC have, developed capabilities to face the challenges that this new golden age of aviation is presenting. Like I mentioned before, kind of like changing the tire while we're barreling down the highway. We have to keep up with the lessons learned that we have. We have to keep up with our own documentation. We have to be able to lay the pieces of that foundation so that we can build on that. We've got lots of great lessons on how to handle lithium-ion batteries. We have really learned a lot as far as handling hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells. And really, we are leaning in on how we get that certification, how we get the regulatory authorities on board to certify this new and novel technology. And that concludes what I had to say about flight tests. Thank you so much for having me. I'd love to answer any questions that you guys might have on this topic.